As a man thinks, effect of thought on circumstances. A man's mind may be likened to a garden which may be intelligently cultivated or allowed to run wild. But whether cultivated or neglected, it must and will bring forth. If no useful seeds are put into it, then the abundance of useless weed seeds will fall therein and will continue to produce their kind. Just as a gardener cultivates his plot, keeping it free from weeds and growing the flowers and fruits which he requires, so a man may tend the garden of his mind, weeding out all the wrong, useless, and impure thoughts and cultivating towards perfection the flowers and the fruits of right, useful, and pure thoughts. By pursuing this process, a man sooner or later discovers that he is the master gardener of his soul and the director of his life. He also reveals within himself the laws of thought and understands that ever increasing accuracy, how the thought forces and the mind elements operate in the shaping of his character, circumstances, and destiny. Thought and character are one, and as character can only manifest and discover itself through environment and circumstance, the outer conditions of a person's life will always be found in to be harmoniously related to his inner state. This does not mean that a man's circumstances at any given time are an indication of his entire character, but that those circumstances are so intimately connected with his vital thought elements within himself that for the time being they are indispensable to his development. Every man is where he is by the law of his being. The thoughts which he has built into his character have brought him there, and in the arrangement of his life there is no element of chance, but all is the result of law which cannot err. This is just as true of those who feel out of harmony with their surroundings as of those who are contented with them. As a progressive and evolving being, man is where he is, that he may learn, that he may grow, and as he learns the spiritual lesson which any circumstances contains for him, it passes away and gives place to other circumstances. Man is buffeted by circumstances so long as he believes himself to be the creature of outside conditions, but when he realizes he is the creative power and that he may command the hidden soil and seeds of his being out of which the circumstances grow, he then becomes the rightful master of himself. Then circumstances grow out of the thought. Every man knows who has for any length of the time practiced self-control and self-purification, for he will have noticed that the alteration on his circumstances has been an exact ratio with his altered mental condition. So true is this, that when a man earnestly applies himself to remedy the defects of his character and makes swift and marked progress, he passes rapidly through the succession of vicissitudes. The soul attracts that which it secretly harbors, that which it loves, and also that which it fears. It reaches the height of the cherished aspiration, it falls to the level of the unchastened desires, and circumstances are the means by which the soul receives its own. Every thought, seed sown or allowed to fall into the mind or to take root there, produces its own blossoming sooner or later into act and bearing its own fruitage of opportunity and circumstances. Good thoughts bring good fruit and bad thoughts bad fruit. The outer world of circumstances shapes itself to the inner world of thought, and both the pleasant and the unpleasant external conditions are the factors which make for the ultimate good of the individual, and the reaper of his own harvest then learns both by suffering and bliss. Following the inmost desired aspirations and the thoughts by which he allows himself to be dominated, pursuing the will of the webs of impure imaginings, and steadfastly walking the highways of strong and high endeavor, a man at last arrives at the fruition and fulfillment in the outer conditions of his life. The laws of the growth and adjustment everywhere obtain. A man does not come to the almshouse or the jail of tyranny or fate or circumstances, but by the pathway of groveling thoughts and base desires. Neither does a pure mind man fall suddenly into crime of stress or for mere external force. Criminal thought has long been success fostered in the heart, and the hour of opportunity revealed his gathered power. Circumstance does not make the man, it reveals him to himself. No such condition can exist as descending into the vice and its attendant suffering, apart from the vicious inclination and ascending it into virtue and its pure happiness without the continued cultivation of virtuous aspirations. And the man, therefore, as the Lord and the master of thought, is the maker of himself, the shaper and the author of environment. Even at birth, the soul comes of its own, and through every step of its earthly pilgrimage, it attracts those combinations of conditions which reveal itself, which are the reflections of its own purity and impurity in strength and weakness. Men do not attract which they want, but that which they are. Their whims, fancies, and ambitions are thwarted at every step, but their innermost thoughts and desires are faked with their own food, be it foul or clean. The divinity that shapes our ends is in ourselves. It is in our very self. Man are killed only by himself, thought and action, or jailers, or by fate. They in prison, being base, they are also the angels of freedom. They liberate, being noble. Now, what he wishes and prays for does a man care, but what he justly earns. His wishes and prayers are only gratified and answered when they harmonize with the thoughts and actions. In the light of this truth, what then is the meaning of fighting against circumstances? It means that a man is continually revolting against its effect without, while all the time he is nourishing and preserving its cause in the heart. That cause may take the form of the conscious vice or an unconscious weakness, but whatever it is, it absolutely retards the efforts of its possessor and thus calls aloud for remedy. Men are anxious to improve their circumstances but are unwilling to improve themselves. They therefore remain bound. The man who does not shrink from self-crucifixion can never accomplish the object upon his heart is set. This is true of earthly as well as heavenly things. Even the man whose sole object is to acquire wealth must be prepared to make the person sacrifices before he can accomplish the object, and how much more he who would realize a strong and well-poised life. Here is a man who's wretchedly poor. He's extremely anxious that his surrounding and home comfort should be improved, yet all the time he shrinks his work and considers it justified in trying to deceive the employer on the ground of insufficiency of his wages. Such a man does not understand the simplest rudiments of his principles, which are the basis of the true prosperity, and is not only totally unfitted to rise out of the wretchedness, but is actually attracting to himself a still deeper wretchedness by dwelling in and acting out indolent, deceptive, and unmanly thoughts. Here is a rich man who is the victim of painful and persistent disease as a result of gluttony. He is willing to give up sums of money to get rid of it, and he will not sacrifice his gluttonous desires. He wants to gratify his taste for rich and unnatural viands and have his health wild. Such a man is totally unfit to have health, because he does not yet learn the first principles of a healthy life. Here is an employer of labor who adopts crude measures to avoid paying the regulation wages, and in the hope of making larger profits, reduces the wages of his work people. Such a man is altogether unfitted for prosperity, and when he finds himself bankrupt both as regards reputation and riches, he blames circumstances, not knowing that he is the sole author of his condition. I have introduced these three cases merely as illustration of the truth that a man is the causer of his circumstances, and that wise, aiming at a good end, he is continually frustrating its accomplishment by encouraging thoughts and desires which cannot possibly harmonize with that end. Such cases could be multiplied and varied almost indefinitely, but this is not necessary, as the reader can, if he so resolves, trace the action of the laws of thought in his own mind and life. Until this is done, mere external facts cannot have as a ground of reasoning. Circumstances, however, are so complicated, thought is so deeply rooted, and the conditions of happiness vary so vastly with individuals that a man's entire self-condition, although he is known to himself, cannot be judged by another from the external aspect of life alone. A man may be honest in certain directions, yet suffer privations. A man may be dishonest in certain directions, yet acquire wealth. But the conclusion always formed that the man fails because of his particular honesty, and that the other prosper because of his particular dishonesty, is the result of superficial judgment, which assumes that the dishonest man is almost totally corrupt and the honest man is entirely virtuous. In the light of deeper knowledge and wider circumstance experience, such judgment is found to be erroneous. The dishonest man may have some admirable virtues which the other does not possess, and honest man obnoxious vices which is absent in the other. The honest man reaps the good results of the honest thoughts and acts. He also brings upon himself the sufferings which vices produce. The dishonest man likewise garners his own suffering and happiness. It is pleasing to human vanity to believe that one suffers because of one's virtue, but not until a man has extirpated every sickly, bitter, and impure thought from his mind, and washed every sinful stain from his soul, can he be in a position to know and declare that his sufferings are the result of his good and not of his bad qualities, and on the way to yet long before he has reached that supreme perfection, he will have found working in his mind and life the great law which is absolutely just and which cannot therefore give good for evil and evil for good. Possessed of such knowledge, he will then know, looking back upon his last ignorance and blindness, that his life is and always was justly ordered, and that all his past experience, good or bad, were the equitable outworking of his evolving yet unevolved self. Good thoughts and actions can never produce bad results, and bad thoughts and results can never produce good results. This is but saying that nothing can come from the corn but corn, nothing that from nettles but nettles. Men misunderstand this law as a natural world and work with it, but few understand it in mental and moral world, and they therefore do not cooperate with it. Suffering is always the effect of wrong thought in some direction. It is the indication that the individual is out of harmony